The sun hung over the small township of Kwamashu, casting a warm golden hue across the dusty streets. Children's laughter echoed between the tightly packed houses, mingling with the distant hum of life in the township. Among the children was Ayanda Dlamini, a bright-eyed, energetic 13-year-old girl whose smile could light up even the darkest corner of the township. Her braided hair bounced with each joyful step as she chased after her friends, their laughter blending into the soundtrack of a carefree childhood. Ayanda lived in a modest two-room shack made of corrugated iron, its walls weathered by years of harsh sun and rain. Inside, it was cramped but filled with love. She shared the small space with her mother, Zinhle, and her younger brother, Sipho, who was just 8 years old. Despite the hardships they faced, Ayanda was happy. She dreamed of becoming a teacher one day, imagining herself in front of a classroom, guiding eager young minds like her own. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the township, Zinhle's voice rang out from their home. "Ayanda, it's getting late. Come help me with dinner." Her voice was warm, but laced with the weariness of a woman who had seen too much struggle in her life, but still held on to hope for her children. Ayanda ran towards the house, her heart light, unaware of the darkness that loomed on the horizon of her young life. Inside, the smell of pap and chakalaka filled the air, a comforting reminder of home. Zinhle stood over the small stove, stirring the pot with one hand while the other gently cradled Sipho, who clung onto her leg, tired from a day of play. "Mama, can I go to Tando's house tomorrow after school? We're going to study together," Ayanda asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Zinhle smiled, her face softening as she looked at her daughter. "Yes, my child, but remember to come home before dark. The streets are not safe after sunset." Ayanda nodded eagerly. "I will, Mama, I promise." The evening passed peacefully, with Ayanda helping her mother prepare dinner and then sitting down together as a family to eat. The warmth of their small home wrapped around them like a protective blanket, shielding them from the harsh realities outside. But even within this cocoon of safety, there were cracks beginning to form. After dinner, Zinhle sat at the small table, counting the last few coins she had. She sighed deeply, the weight of their financial struggles pressing down on her like a heavy stone. Ayanda watched her mother quietly, sensing the unspoken worries that lingered in the air. She was old enough to understand that money was tight, that there were days when Zinhle went without so that her children could eat. "Mama, is everything okay?" Ayanda asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. Zinhle looked up, her eyes tired but loving. "Don't worry, Ayanda. Everything will be fine. Just focus on your studies, okay? You're going to do great things one day." Ayanda nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She believed her mother because that was what she had always done. She believed that if she worked hard enough, if she stayed good and did everything right, her dreams would come true. But fate had other plans. The next day at school, Ayanda's teachers praised her for her hard work and dedication. She was one of the top students in her class, and it was no secret that she had the potential to go far. After school, she joined Tando at her house, where they spent hours studying together, their heads bent over their books, whispering answers and solving them. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Ayanda gathered her things to head home. "I have to go now, Tando. My mama will be worried if I'm late." Tando nodded, understanding. "Okay, Ayanda. See you tomorrow." Ayanda stepped out into the fading light, the streets of KwaMashu quieting as the day drew to a close. She walked briskly, her mind still buzzing with the day's lessons. But as she turned the corner onto her street, she noticed a man standing near her house. He was tall, well-dressed, and out of place in the township. His presence was unsettling, though Ayanda couldn't quite understand why. As she approached, the man smiled at her, his teeth white and gleaming in the twilight. "Unjani sis? Are you Ayanda?" he asked, his voice smooth like honey. Ayanda hesitated, her instincts telling her to be cautious. "Yes, I'm Ayanda. Who are you?" "My name is Becky," he said, extending her hand. "I'm a friend of your mother's. She mentioned you are a very bright girl with big dreams." Ayanda didn't take his hand. Something about him made her uneasy, but his words flattered her, and she felt a small flicker of pride. "Yes, I want to be a teacher one day." Becky nodded, his smile widening. "That's wonderful. I'm actually here to help your mother and you. I know things have been difficult, but I have an opportunity that could change everything for you and your family." Ayanda's curiosity was piqued, but before she could ask more, the door to her house opened and Zinhle stepped out, her expression a mix of surprise and worry. "Ayanda, get inside," she said sharply, her eyes darting to Becky. Becky's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened slightly as he looked at Zinhle. "Good evening, Zinhle. I was just telling Ayanda about the opportunity I have for you both." Zinhle's jaw tightened, and she quickly ushered Ayanda inside. "Thank you, Becky. We're not interested. Please leave." Once inside, Zinhle bolted the door, her hands trembling slightly. Ayanda looked at the mother, confused. "Mama, who was that man? He said he wanted to help us." Zinhle knelt down in front of her daughter, her eyes filled with a fear Ayanda had never seen before. "Ayanda, listen to me very carefully. You must stay away from that man. He is not here to help us. He is dangerous. Promise me you won't speak to him again." Ayanda nodded, a heart pounding in her chest. "I promise, Mama." But as she lay in bed that night, Ayanda couldn't shake the feeling of unease that Becky had stirred in her. His words echoed in her mind, a mix of flattery and promises that seemed too good to be true. Little did she know this was only the beginning of the darkness that would soon engulf her life, changing it forever. As sleep finally took her, Ayanda's dreams were filled with shadows, creeping ever closer, threatening to swallow the light that still lingered in her heart. And though she didn't yet understand it, the world she had known was slipping away, and with it, the last remnants of her innocence. The days following Ayanda's encounter with Becky were filled with a growing sense of unease. Though she tried to return to her normal routine, school, studying, helping her mother at home, there was a new tension in the air, an unspoken fear that lingered between her and Zinhle. Ayanda could feel it, but she didn't know how to name it, let alone understand it. Zinhle became more protective, more anxious. She insisted on walking Ayanda to and from school, a practice that had stopped when Ayanda turned 12 and was deemed old enough to make the short journey on her own. Now, with every step they took together, Zinhle's eyes darted around, scanning the streets for any sign of Becky. But Becky didn't reappear, and slowly Ayanda's fear began to fade, replaced by the demands of everyday life. She threw herself into her studies, determined to keep her dreams alive. Yet, the encounter had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, a small, persistent voice that questioned whether her dreams were even possible in a world so harsh and unforgiving. Then one afternoon after school, as Ayanda packed her books into her bag, she noticed a shiny new cell phone lying on her desk. Confused, she picked it up, turning it over in her hands. It was sleek and expensive looking, a far cry from the old, cracked phone her mother used. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. Her heart raced as she glanced around the classroom, but her classmates were busy chatting and packing up, oblivious to her discovery. Ayanda hesitated, unsure what to do. She knew this was wrong, that she should report it to a teacher or hand it over to Lost and Found. But curiosity got the better of her, and she slipped the phone into her bag. That evening, after finishing her homework and helping Zinhle with dinner, Ayanda retreated to her room, her thoughts returning to the mysterious phone. She pulled it out and turned it on. The screen lit up, and she noticed there was a single message waiting for her. "Hello, Ayanda. I hope you like the gift. I'm here to help you and your family. Call me when you're ready to talk." There was no name attached to the message, but Ayanda knew who it was from. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. It was Becky. How had he managed to leave this phone without anyone noticing? And more importantly, what did he want from her? For a long time she sat there, the phone heavy in her hands, her mind racing with possibilities. She thought about her mother's warnings, about the fear in Zinhle's eyes when she had told her to stay away from Becky. But she also thought about the struggles they faced every day, the endless worry over money, the constant fear of losing what little they had. Against her better judgment, Ayanda decided to keep the phone. She convinced herself that it didn't mean anything, that she wasn't doing anything wrong by holding on to it. She wouldn't call Becky, she told herself. She just wanted to know what he would say, what kind of help he was offering. Over the next few days, Ayanda kept the phone hidden, checking it only when she was alone. Messages from Becky came regularly, always kind, always filled with promises of a better life. He never pressured her, but his words were carefully chosen, designed to play on her fears and hopes. "I can help your mother, Ayanda. She shouldn't have to struggle like this. You are a bright girl with a big future. You deserve more than this life can give you. I can make your dreams come true. All you have to do is trust me." Each message chipped away at Ayanda's resolve. She began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Becky could offer something real, something that could change their lives for the better. The doubt she had pushed aside now crept back, stronger and more insistent. One evening, after another argument between Zinhle and a creditor at their door, Ayanda found herself standing in her room, staring at the phone. The weight of their struggles pressed down on her like never before. She thought of Sipho, of his bright, innocent smile, and how it had dimmed in recent months. She thought of her mother, worn down by years of hard work and endless worry. Ayanda picked up the phone and typed a single word. "Hello." The reply came almost instantly. "I'm glad you reached out, Ayanda. Let's meet tomorrow after school. I have something for you." Ayanda's heart pounded in her chest. She knew she was crossing a line, one she could never uncross. But a part of her was desperate for something, anything, that might offer a way out. The next day, Ayanda moved through school in a daze. Her mind was consumed by thoughts of meeting with Becky. She felt a gnawing anxiety, but also a strange sense of anticipation. It was as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing she shouldn't jump, but feeling the pull of the unknown, the promise of something different. After school, she told Thando she had to rush home, but instead of heading home, she took a different route, one that led her to a quiet, secluded spot near the edge of the township. As she approached, she saw Peggy waiting for her, leaning casually against a sleek black car. He smiled as she drew near, that same gleaming smile that had unsettled her the first time they met. "Ayanda, it's good to see you," he said smoothly, his voice warm and inviting. Ayanda forced a smile, her nerves on edge. "What do you want from me?" Peggy chuckled softly, as if her question amused him. "I don't want anything from you, Ayanda. I want to help you. I want to give you what you deserve. A better life, a future. I have something for you that can change everything." He opened the car door and pulled out a small, elegant box. He handed it to Ayanda, who hesitated before taking it. Inside was a gold necklace, delicate and beautiful, something she had only seen in magazines or on TV. It sparkled in the fading light, mesmerizing her. "Consider this a small gift," Peggy said. "There's more where that came from. All you have to do is trust me." Ayanda stared at the necklace, her heart racing. The weight of the gift in her hands felt like a heavy burden, a symbol of the choice she was being asked to make. She knew deep down that accepting this gift meant accepting something far more dangerous, something that could change her life forever. But in that moment, standing before Peggy with his promises of a better life, Ayanda felt the pull of desperation, the allure of an escape from the crushing reality of her world. She looked up at Peggy, the words caught in her throat, a mixture of fear and longing swirling within her. "I'll think about it," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Peggy's smile widened. "Take your time, sissy. I'll be waiting." Ayanda turned and walked away, the box clutched tightly in her hand, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and dread. She knew she was standing on the precipice of something dark and dangerous, but the promise of relief, of something better, was too strong to ignore. As she made her way home, the weight of the necklace seemed to grow heavier with each step, a tangible reminder of the choice she had yet to make. And though she didn't realize it, that choice would soon set her on a path from which there would be no return. In the weeks that followed, Ayanda found herself slipping further into the web that Peggy had woven around her. The weight of the gold necklace, now hidden deep in her closet, was a constant reminder of the choice she had yet to fully make. Every day, the decision seemed to loom larger, pressing in on her until it felt like there was no escape. Peggy's messages became more frequent, more insistent. He continued to promise Ayanda a way out of her struggles, but there was always a sense of something unspoken in his words, something that made her uneasy. Yet, as the financial pressures at home mounted, Zinhle falling deeper into debt, creditors becoming more aggressive, and the constant fear of eviction, Ayanda felt increasingly cornered. One Friday afternoon, as Ayanda walked home from school, she noticed Peggy's car parked at the end of the street. Her heart skipped a bit as she saw him leaning against the car, waiting for her. The now familiar feeling of anxiety twisted in her stomach, but she forced herself to keep walking, determined to ignore him. But as she passed by, Peggy called out to her, his voice smooth and commanding. "Ayanda, wait." She hesitated, torn between the urge to keep walking and the pull of his words. Finally, she stopped and turned to face him. Peggy smiled, that same unsettling smile that had first drawn her in. "I have another gift for you, something that can help your family." Ayanda frowned, her suspicion growing. "I told you, I don't want anything from you." Peggy's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating. "I understand, but this isn't just about you, Sissy. This is about helping your mother, your brother. You care about them, don't you? Ayanda's resolve wavered. She did care about her family more than anything. And that was what made Peggy's words so dangerous. They played on her deepest fears and desires. "What do you want from me, Peggy?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. He stepped closer, his tone gentle yet persuasive. "I only want you to do a small favor for me. Nothing too difficult. Just a simple task. In return, I'll make sure your mother's debts are taken care of, and you won't have to worry about money again." Ayanda's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. She knew that agreeing to beg his favor would be crossing a line, but she also knew that without his help, her family's situation would only get worse. "What kind of favor?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Peggy's smile widened, sensing her vulnerability. "It's nothing much. I need you to deliver a package for me. That's all. I can't do it myself, and I trust you, Ayanda. You're smart, responsible, and no one will suspect you." Ayanda felt a cold chill run down her spine. She knew that whatever was in that package, it wasn't something good. But the thought of her mother's worried face, the weight of their financial troubles, and the promise of relief from all of it was too strong to resist. "What's in the package?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Peggy's eyes narrowed slightly, but a smile never faltered. "It's better if you don't know, Sissy. The less you know, the safer you'll be. Just deliver it to the address I give you, and everything will be taken care of." Ayanda stood there, torn between the fear of what she was about to do and the desperate hope that this could finally be the solution to all her problems. In that moment, the lure of escape was stronger than her fear. She nodded slowly, feeling a sense of resignation settle over her. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'll do it." Peggy's smile widened, victorious. He reached into the car and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped package. It was deceptively light, its contents hidden by layers of brown paper. He handed it to Ayanda, who took it with trembling hands. "Good girl," he said, his voice smooth and soothing. "Just deliver this to the address written on the paper inside. Do it tomorrow, and then we'll be done." Ayanda nodded, clutching the package tightly. As she walked away, the weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her, filling her with a sense of dread that she couldn't shake. The next day, Ayanda made her way to the address Peggy had given her. It was in a part of town she rarely visited, a neighborhood known for its rough edges and dangerous streets. As she walked, the package in her bag felt heavier with each step, as if it carried the weight of the chores she had made. When she finally arrived, she found herself standing in front of a dilapidated building, its windows covered with grime and its door hanging loosely on rusted hinges. Ayanda hesitated, her fear growing with every second. She wanted to turn back, to run away and forget this ever happened, but she knew it was too late. She had made a promise to Peggy, and more importantly, she had made a promise to herself that she would do whatever it took to help her family. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. It creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit room inside. A man stood there, tall and menacing, his face hidden in the shadows. "You are Ayanda?" he asked, his voice rough and impatient. Ayanda nodded, too scared to speak. She reached into her bag and pulled out the package, handing it to the man with shaking hands. He took it without a word, his eyes cold and distant. "Tell Peggy it's done," he said before slamming the door shut. Ayanda stood there for a moment, frozen in place by the fear that had gripped her heart. Then, with a sense of finality, she turned and walked away, her steps quickening as she put as much distance as possible between herself and that building. Days turned into weeks, and Ayanda tried to return to her normal life, but nothing was the same. The guilt and fear from what she had done weighed heavily on her, a constant reminder of the dark path she had started down. Bheki kept his promise. Zindle's debts were mysteriously paid off, and for a brief moment, it seemed like everything might actually be okay. But the relief was short-lived. Soon, Bheki came back, and this time, he wasn't asking for a favor. He was demanding it. The task became more frequent, more dangerous, and Ayanda found herself sinking deeper and deeper into a world she didn't understand. A world where every decision came with a price. Her grades began to slip, and she distanced herself from her friends, unable to explain changes in her life. Thando noticed, of course, but every time she asked Ayanda what was wrong, Ayanda would brush her off with excuses that even she didn't believe. At home, Zindle was oblivious to the darkness consuming her daughter. She was relieved that the debts were gone and that they had some breathing room for once, but she didn't see the toll they was taking on Ayanda. She didn't see the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion that came from carrying a burden too heavy for a 14-year-old to bear. One night, after another dangerous delivery, Ayanda returned home and collapsed on her bed, tears streaming down her face. She had tried to be strong, to convince herself that what she was doing was necessary, but the guilt was eating away at her. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, but she also knew there was no way out. Bheki had her trapped, and there was nothing she could do to escape. The thought of going to the police crossed her mind, but she knew that Bheki's reach was long and his influence powerful. She was just a child, and he was a man with connections and power that she couldn't begin to understand. And so, Ayanda continued to spiral deeper into despair, each new task pushing her further away from the life she had once known, from the dreams she had once held so dear. The breaking point came on a night when Bheki asked Ayanda to do something she couldn't bring herself to do. This time, it wasn't just a package delivery. It was something far more sinister, something that made her blood run cold. "I can't do this," Ayanda whispered, her voice trembling. Bheki's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold anger. "You don't have a choice, Sissy. You are in this now. There's no turning back." But Ayanda knew she couldn't do it. She couldn't cross that line. Not this time. The thought of what he was asking her to do made her sick to her stomach, and she knew that if she did it, she would never be able to live with herself. She ran. She didn't know where she was going, but she ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding in her chest, tears streaming down her face. She didn't stop until she reached the outskirts of the township, where she collapsed to the ground, her body shaking with sobs. In that moment, Ayanda realized how far she had fallen, how deeply she had been pulled into Bheki's world, and she knew that there was only one way out. She had to tell someone. She had to find help, even if it meant putting herself in danger. She couldn't keep living like this, couldn't keep lying to herself and her family. The next day, Ayanda gathered all her courage and went to Thando's house. Thando was the only person she felt she could trust, and the only one who might be able to help her. When Thando opened the door and saw Ayanda's tear-streaked face, she immediately pulled her friend aside, her eyes filled with concern. "Ayanda, what's wrong? What happened?" Thando asked, her voice full of worry. Ayanda broke down, the weight of everything she had been holding in pouring out in a flood of tears. She told Thando everything, the encounters with Bheki, the deliveries, the growing fear that had consumed her life. Thando listened in stunned silence, her heart breaking for her friend. When Ayanda finished, Thando didn't hesitate. "We have to go to the police," Thando said firmly. "We have to tell them everything." Ayanda nodded, knowing Thando was right. It was the only way to escape Bheki's grasp, the only way to find a path back to the life she had lost. The girls made their way to the local police station, where Ayanda told her story to an officer. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but as she spoke, she felt a small glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out of darkness. Ayanda's decision to come forward set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to Bheki's arrest. The investigation revealed the extent of his operations, and Ayanda's testimony was crucial in bringing him to justice. But the road to recovery was long and difficult. Ayanda had been through more than any child should ever have to endure, and the scars of her experiences would stay with her forever. With the support of her mother, Thando, and the community, Ayanda slowly began to rebuild her life. She returned to school, though the innocence and carefree nature of her earlier years were gone. She was older now, wiser, but also burdened by the knowledge of how cruel the world could be. Zinhle, devastated by what her daughter had gone through, vowed to do everything in her power to protect her children and to ensure that they would never have to face such dangers again. Ayanda's dreams of becoming a teacher were still alive. They were now shaped by a deeper understanding of the world. She wanted to help other young girls like herself, to teach them to be strong, to recognize danger, and to know that they always had the power to say no, to seek help, and to protect themselves. The story of Ayanda's descent into darkness and her eventual escape became a cautionary tale in the community, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. Though Ayanda's life will never be the same, she found strength in her survival, and she became determined to use her experience to help others avoid the same fate. And in that determination, there was a small flickering light, a light that had survived the darkness and now served as a beacon of hope for those who might follow in her footsteps.